Hello and welcome to The Price of Music, the show that looks at the money behind the music industry with me, Steve Lamack, and Music Ally's Head of Insight, Stuart Dredge. It is another of our listener question specials. Thank you very much to everyone who sent us a query, and if we don't get to it today, it's probably somewhere in the queue of questions to be answered, or it's fallen down the back of Producer Guy's desk, but keep them coming. We'll give you our address again at the end of the episode, but we'll start with this from Ian McKinnon. Can you shed any light on what the difference is between the PRS and PPL, and who should be members of which organisation? Well, can you be a member of both, says Ian, and how does each organisation go about collecting money and who from? This is a recurring topic, this already, but it is important, particularly if you're a musician, because if you're not a member of these organisations, you might be missing out on some income. So can you offer us any advice and clear this up for us, Stuart?
Yeah, I mean, at its simplest level, PRS for music is collecting royalties for songwriters and publishers, so it's focused on publishing. And PPL is collecting royalties for record labels and artists, so it's focused on the recordings aspect. So when a song is played on the radio, PRS will collect and pay the royalties for the publishing side of it, and PPL will handle the label and artist side of it. But yeah, and you can be in both. So if you're a songwriter, PRS for music. If you're a performing artist, PPL. But obviously a lot of people write their own songs and perform them, in which case you not just can be in both, you should be in both because they're collecting money and you'll be paid it. So yeah, that's the basic gist of it. And in terms of how they collect it, for digital services, it's a case of getting data on what they've played and dividing up the royalties from that. But then they'll also, PRS they're the people who ring up hairdressers and say, have you got a license? So there's a lot of kind of the equivalent of door knocking, of saying, you're a business, are you playing music? Do you need a license? And making sure that everyone who is playing music is paying properly for it. And that's basically the difference.
I remember the old days when I first joined. I remember the old days. Back when I first joined Radio 1, we were still, well, I say we, the production team was still writing down publishing details for every record we played so that you could pass the information on to the collecting companies. Whereas these days you just write it in once when the sound file goes into the computer playout system, you put it in once and then it does all the work and tallies up how many times that track's been played, and that information goes off to PRS. Thank you very much, Ian, for that. Question from Nick White. How does the money get split from gig tickets? I recently bought a ticket from Ticketmaster for a show at the O2 Academy, Islington. To the £25 face value ticket price were added £3.15 service charge, £1.10 facility charge, and £2.75 order processing fee. The e-ticket delivery charge was free, though I could have added a further £2.95 for, wait for this, for a souvenir classic paper ticket. How does it all break down and who gets what? This is a great question because I think we've all balked at the additional fees attached to buying a ticket. And I think even various parts of the industry are at odds with each other over this. But if we try and break it down, because I was a bit bamboozled by this. So if anyone from a ticketing agency wants to get in touch, do feel free. But do you want to run through? Because I think there is an explanation, isn't there, to what these fees are on Ticketmaster's website. But shall we go through them? Do you want to do them one by one, Stuart?
I think the fact that you and I were going, what is a service charge and what is an order processing fee? And we didn't even know. I think it shows the lack of... So the fact that Ticketmaster's got a section of its site explaining this, I suspect that shows it's seen this debate and is kind of a bit sensitive about people saying, what are these fees? So the way it divides it is, right, there's face value, which is 25 quid in this case from Nick, and everything else, all the fees. And what Ticketmaster says is it doesn't keep anything from the face value. That goes to the event organizer, so the promoter, who pays the cost for hiring the venue, for paying the artist, the cost of the tour, marketing the tour, and insurance, which can be a big, increasingly big part of it. So that face value side is everything that goes to the organizer of the event. And then the charges are what Ticketmaster, in this case, takes a proportion of. And it's got this whole section saying, what do we do with that money? Well, they pay for running its website and apps. It puts the scanners in the box offices so they can scan you on the way in. It pays for the technology they're using to kind of try and tackle bots and hackers. and their customer service, which might bring a wry smile from anyone who's ever had to ring up customer service and had to wait. So in terms of, that's like how the fees in general, what they're spent on or what they're used for. But in terms of what a service charge is compared to a facility charge, compared to an order processing fee, I'm still a little bit hazy on that. But I was hoping you might have some thoughts.
Yeah, I mean the order processing fee, that's for processing the order. I suppose
I
so
should
they've
have
added
known.
on. They're basically saying that's what that cost is, and then the service fee. Yeah, again on Ticketmaster's website it says helps us to cover the costs involved in running our website and booking line, etc. I mean, I spoke to somebody who's in the industry who said the service fee / processing fee that goes to the ticketing company to cover the work putting on the show or putting the tickets on sale, fulfilling the sale, and all the other bits and pieces that they do. So they keep that money. The facility fee goes to the venue, which is trying to raise additional income to cover the running of costs of the building, which is why sometimes you'll see the facility fee is sometimes referred to as the restoration fee, but the money from this goes towards the cost that the venue incurs. So I imagine that goes to, well, everything really: business rates, energy bills, all the overheads. Because if you think about it, in cases where, and a lot of the bigger gigs, it will work like this. The venue's not putting on the gig. Sometimes it's the venue putting on the gig, but if the venue aren't putting on the gig, a promoter comes along, pays to hire the venue, but that higher cost might not actually meet the running cost that the venue has to pay, if you see what I mean. Because certain venues, I mean, a lot of venues, I know, but particularly at this point, a lot of the bigger venues are still carrying around loans from the COVID era, which got them through COVID. But anyway, so the facility fee is an additional way of helping the venue to stay afloat. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, yeah. And I think one thing I was going to say is that there's a kind of a strand debate like, oh, fees, what are they? They're terrible, they're bad, it should be face value only. But there is an important element that running a ticketing service is an expensive business, making it safe, making it secure, making it work. But I think the complaints have been about the transparency of what are these fees, and do you know them before you start buying the ticket, or do they suddenly get lumped on at the end? And some of the reforms we've talked about of the ticketing market in previous episodes are focused on this, so that to make actually all this stuff that we had to go looking for, to make it more obvious, make it kind of be clearly stated, and make sure you never get surprised by these fees. Just you're about to click.
I think it's just the level of the fees, how much the fees are. I think again on that Ticketmaster website, I think it says that they agree the level of fees with, I guess, the promoters rather than the artists in a lot of cases beforehand. But that on some tickets now where you're up around £17 worth of fees feels steep on top of possibly an already quite expensive ticket, I think. And then the the addition of new fees, which seem to be joining this list of what additional costs you're having to meet. When it got to the point that they were charging you for an e-ticket, in this case, Nick said didn't have to pay for the e-ticket, but in some cases, you're getting charged for printing your ticket at home. Hang on a second, you should be paying me. It's my ink.
I'm paying HP. Hang on, but can we do a bit on souvenir classic paper tickets? Because
I mean that to me, sorry Ticketmaster, but that seems like a bit of a racket to me. I mean, it's lovely to have a physical ticket in your hand, isn't it? Or something that you can put with all your other ticket stubs in a nice frame print on the wall. But £2.95 classic souvenir
that
ticket.
seems like a good business to someone. But yeah, because I've got a drawer full of my tickets, but they all stop quite abruptly when e-tickets came in, and it was all printouts.
Yeah.
So I did just make me a bit wistful and think, it'd be nice to have a souvenir. But yeah, if I'm sucking up those other fees, I think I'm going to probably not click on that box saying £2.95 for a souvenir ticket.
I'll tell you one thing, which I mean, I'm honour bound to mention, but we have missed out one thing
Mm.
from the face value of the ticket, which is probably is the chunkiest amount of money which is included in the ticket price. The biggest fee of all that you're paying, Nick, is the 20% of the ticket that's going straight to the
Of
government
course.
via VAT. And I mean, so in Nick's case, what was it? £25 for the ticket. So Nick, £5 of your money there goes straight into the government's pockets. I mean, no one else is taking so much while doing so little for their money, said one industry commentator earlier this week. I mean, and this is partly the reason why there are continued calls for a VAT cut. Because if we were in line with the EU or America, where VAT is on average is about 6 to 7% on tickets, then then ticket prices might be cheaper, or some of these additional fees we might be able to get rid of them,
Mm.
or at least they wouldn't be at the level that they are now. So it's the VAT argument. I know it comes up an awful lot, but everywhere you go in the industry, from small venues to massive arenas to festivals, everyone is calling for a VAT cut, to put money back into the live music industry.
And it's hard. We talked about it last episode, didn't we? The manifestos calling out, so whoever the government is, come July the 5th,
Mm.
they're going to have maybe a decision to make on this. Should we do that? And the worry, I suppose, is there's no money left for anything. So cutting VAT is not a priority. But there's been a very clear message from the industry, like you say, of this would be really good. This could help people stimulate
Mm.
ticket sales and help the touring scene. And so, yeah, fingers crossed, because that could be really meaningful.
Question from, by the way, thank you very much, Nick, for that. Question from Matt Edible. I'm an artist looking for a record label to release my band's new album. I've not ruled out starting my own label, and I know that in this day and age, artists need to be able to do all of the jobs. But I also have to be honest with myself and admit that I'm pretty rubbish when it comes to the business side of things. Plus, the value of working with a label with an established reputation, who knows what they're doing, makes things so much easier and instantly gives it more credibility. As the record is already made and pretty much ready for release, I've been advised that I should be looking out for some sort of licensing deal with an established record label. I've noticed that labels like Bella Union have been using this model for quite some time now, especially when releasing artists who may have existing record contracts with labels in other countries. Could you enlighten me a bit as to how this sort of licensing deal works, not just for my own purposes, but for bigger artists? As I've always wondered what the advantages of these sorts of deals have over traditional record deals. This is quite a big question. Do you want to start? I mean, there's lots of different ways of looking at this and the pros and cons, but do you want to start, Stuart?
Yeah, well, first off, some praise for Matt, really, because being honest with yourself and knowing you're pretty rubbish when it comes to the business side of things, that's a really important bit of self-awareness for an artist, because so much of the message around is like, you don't need a label, you can release yourself. And to have that self-awareness to go, yes, but all those things that a label would do, I'm not sure I'm cut out for that. That's a really important bit of self-awareness. So, congratulations on that, because that's the perfect starting point. And yeah, I mean, this is part of this bigger trend that's been going on for quite a while now about, there are traditional label deals, but there are other ways of working with labels. And it really boils down to who keeps the rights. So in a traditional deal, you sell your rights to the label, essentially. You get an advance and they own the music. Whereas whether it's a licensing deal, a thing called label services, you keep the rights and the label is basically your partner, isn't it? So the label will do the label stuff, but you are licensing the music to them to do that with, rather than them taking ownership of it.
Maybe we should just splitting those two. Label services is provided by various companies, including I think one or two sort of small majors, or major related labels will do this for you. But you have a record, and then are you essentially employing them to go and market your record?
Yeah. So you're basically picking and choosing from, literally label services. So from whether it's from marketing, promotion, all the stuff that they will do. You can basically pick and choose. Say, well, I will do this and this, but can you do this and this? And you either pay them for that, or they'll take a commission of your sales. But it's much more a business partnership. And licensing, I mean, I think you'll be the expert in this, but I think it's where the main thing is you have to foot the cost of recording, don't you, yourself? So if you have to have a record to license to a label, that means you have to record it first. So you're not getting an advance to cover those costs. So I guess if the advantage is you own your rights and you keep them, the main thing you have to be aware of is that you have to pay for the costs of recording, mixing, mastering that record before you then do that deal. Which you may have that and that may be very cheap, or as Daniel Leck might say, close to zero costs, which musicians got very cross out the other week, didn't they? Because it does cost money to do this stuff.
It does. I'm trying to put myself in Matt's shoes. So I've got a record which is done. Obviously, it depends. It depends on how popular your band is, Matt, and how many copies you think realistically you might sell, because that's the conversation you'll have when you're going to a label. And obviously, you still have to find a label who like your record. But if a label says, "Yeah, we really like the record, we'll license it from you," so you, as Stuart, you just said, you still own your rights, but you're going to license those songs as a one-off to the record label, and then you're putting your trust in them to be able to take that record and do their best with it. I guess in the short term, and it depends, there will be things to look at, like how long does the licensing deal last? Are you licensing it to them for 5 years, 10 years? How long before you get the essentially the ability to take it somewhere else if you wanted to? So be aware of that. And then I suppose, yes, and then it's about negotiating, how much they're buying the license for and what sort of deal. And as you say, it might be a combination deal with, it might be some money, it might be some points on the record that they're taking. But on the other side of it, if you're looking at it from the label's point of view, the label gets don't have to pay for the recording, don't have to go through all the A&R. They know what the record is. They know what they're getting, rather than signing a band and then waiting for the album to emerge, which might not be as good, or the record that they were expecting. So they've got a record that they want, and then off they go and push it. The thing is, the downside for the label, depending on how long the licensing deal is that you do a great job with one record and then the band can go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So you've invested time and effort and done a brilliant job having licensed the album, made it successful, but of course you've only licensed the one album. And because I think I'm in my head, Rough Trade licensed the first Arcade Fire album, but of course then Arcade Fire went off and signed to a major label after that. There's countless examples of this, but I mean, you're right. Bella Union, they license in records. Domino. If you go back and look at another big independent, well-respected independent label, Domino Records. If you go and look at the first 30, 40 album releases on Domino, a lot of those were licensed in from America, which helped grow the reputation of the label, because they could specialize in records. They were taking records they knew that they could work and do something with, and it built their profile. So that's the upside for the label.
Matt also asked about big artists, and this goes right to the top of the industry. So Taylor Swift signed a deal with Universal Music Group a few years ago, and they said very publicly she retains ownership of her recordings under this deal. So that deal is kind of akin to this licensing agreement. I think Megan Thee Stallion signed a deal with Warner Music fairly recently, and she retained full ownership of her recordings and publishing. So at the top end of the industry, when you're getting big artists come to the end of their label deals, this may be becoming more common too, where they'll go in and say, you know what, I could go off on my own, but can we do a new deal where you're promoting my music and you're licensing it from me, but I still own it? So I think for artists at the beginning of their careers, or kind of emerging, this is going to become an option where it's like you can keep your rights. But even for the biggest artists out there, as they come to the end of their traditional label deals, they're going to be looking at this model too. So I think we are going to see it become more common at every level, not just kind of Matt's band and not just Taylor Swift, but everything in between potentially as well. So it's going to become much more common.
I think it's interesting for bands who are starting out or have got to a certain level where you maybe can sell, I don't know, even 1,000 records, say in the UK. Then I think, I mean, it's quite a good compromise, I suppose, isn't it? You know, you're not signed up to a major label for X amount of albums and you don't own your music anymore, but it's not you with boxes of your own vinyl in your garage, trying to work out all the things that you need to do to make that record work for you, finding a distributor and, you know, doing the PR and all the stuff. It's somewhere sort of in the middle, I guess, isn't it? It gives you some autonomy, while also having some expert advice. And the other thing to think about, Matt, is whether you do a deal where you license your record for this country or loads of countries. Because you could license it, depending on the size of the label, you could license it for UK and Europe, but keep America free. And then you could do a separate licensing deal in America. So in theory, that might bring you more money, or you can find a label that knows that market really well, probably better than the label that you've licensed to elsewhere. You see what I mean? You can actually make it work for you. It's more complicated to do in a way, but certainly I know bands. I've worked with bands when I was running a record label. We had at least two of our bands were on different labels in different parts of the world. So Elastica, for instance, were signed to us, an independent label in the UK, but they were signed to Gaffin for I think the rest of the world. We might have had part of Europe, but I think the rest of the world. And we also had the punk band Snuff, who were on Fat Records, which is a specialist American punk rock label run by NoFX. They were on Fat in America, but us in the UK, because we knew what we were doing in different, different, I hate to use the word territories, but in different territories there.
I thought you were going to question the New York doing thing. I mean, I think the other two things I was like, one is lawyers, like actually having a lawyer to look over contracts and agreements is important for this, as it is for any label deal. So that's one thing. And the other thing I think is creative control, which maybe I haven't talked as much about, but this does give you that creative. You record, like Matt said, he's recorded his album already and done it, and it's ready to go. I think, didn't The Darkness do that with their first album? I feel like they recorded it, had it already, and then they licensed it to Atlantic. I feel like that was their deal. And because of that, they had full creative control over that first album, which, then went big. So that is the other aspect here, is you maybe, if it's important to you to have that full creative control to record and release how you want to, and then the label is a partner to help you do that, rather than someone telling you, you need to release 3 more singles and go viral on TikTok before we'll release it. Like it puts you on a different kind of footing, which is partners, rather than, some of the not that this is all labels, but when we've seen some of the friction between artist labels, these kind of deals can help you sidestep some of those kind of arguments.
I love the fact that in the absence of a mention of Black Crows, you've managed to get the Darkness back into this podcast.
Well, they were, the Darkness, say what you like about their music, but I think they were really savvy around that start of their career, because they were breaking, but they had the album ready to go. And there was no kind of sense of we'll sign to a major and they'll tell us what to do. They had it already. So that's in that sense, I feel we can both agree about admiring the Darkness. And maybe
I love that. I also love the fact you've now backed me into a corner where I can't not support the Darkness. Well done.
I'm clever. I haven't managed it with Black Crows yet, but let's see how things go.
Question from Alan Carruthers. How much do football clubs in the UK pay to play music? Is it a standard one-off fee, or is it dependent on the size of the ground? Do they have to submit weekly PRS returns, or is the money apportioned by PRS in some other way? Perhaps you could use Colchester United as an example. This actually takes us back to the public performance rights thing we were talking about the other day, doesn't it? I imagine, I know you've got the answer, but I imagine it's a blanket one-off payment, is it? Or an annual fee that you pay, that the club pays, rather than having to write down the details of every track.
Yeah. I'm on for my sins. I'm on the Sports Events Tariff SE, which was an example. It began in 2022 for PRS for music, and it was applying to performances of copyright music during and in connection with sports events at sports grounds. So not just football, but rugby and cricket and racetracks and motor racing and athletics, all kinds of sports. So there's a tariff for those things. And yeah,
Right,
essentially, it's a royalty per person admitted. So the royalties are based on how many people are coming to the door, and then that's split between
right,
different kinds of music. So there's kind of the music you play before a match, featured build, entry, and exit music. So if you support a football team who has a certain walk-on track, that's got a certain rate to it.
really a different rate to your to any other tracks that are being paid.
Yeah.
That record that's played as famously at Colchester United, Peter the MC will always say as the DJ puts on Fatboy Slim's Right Here Right Now, that there's the dramatic sort of and as that starts, Peter will say it's time to say the teams are in the tunnel, and I mean, feel excited just saying it. But that gets a higher rate, does it, than
Yeah, well,
just your bog
even
standard?
Yeah, and there's even a separate rate for featured integral music, which is music during the match. So, and it says here, includes exits and entries of individual players. So if you have a player who gets their own walk-on track, which I was watching Soccer Aid actually this weekend, and that was quite fun because they had, like, when the guy from EastEnders came on, they played the EastEnders theme tune. That was more of a showcase
Right.
match. Um,
Yeah.
but also scoring of points and goals. So if you've got a goal track, which is increasingly common, isn't it? People play a track when a goal's scored. This is all about the music you play as the football ground or sports ground. So what it doesn't seem to cover, I think, is chants. And I'm still a bit hazy on whether any royalties get paid if the fans are singing a chant based on a song. Whether it's when that's broadcast on TV, like if the Spurs fans are singing the ABBA song for Kulishevsky, which is the best modern example of rewritten lyrics. I think it's "Gimme, Gimme, Gimme" by ABBA, isn't it? Gimme, gimme, gimme a ginger from Sweden. His name is Kulishevsky. I don't know what happens there. Does Bjorn and Benny get a royalty for the Spurs fans singing it if it's broadcast on TV or not? But no. I mean, it'd be great.
No, they wouldn't.
I mean, don't you think the fans who make these songs up deserve the royalties? Like really inventive football chants. There should be some kind of a royalty share. But no, none of this is covered by this. Anyway, this is a tangent. So yeah. So there's a rate, but it's basically on people in door. So Manchester United, Spurs will pay a lot more than a Colchester or a non-league team. It would depend on how many people are coming through the doors.
Right. Okay. So our bill will be less than Manchester City's, obviously. Well, probably less than Bradford City's, actually. I know it is great exposure, though, isn't it? If you make one of those songs that does well, I mean, I know you're not getting individually paid in this scenario. You will get some money, but being played, because I know that I'm not sure if they still do it, but famously, the DJ at Anfield used to play, might still play, up and coming Liverpool artists in the build up to a game. And brilliant, in the old, going back some years when Brighton and Hove Albion were further down the league, we went with Colchester United to Brighton once. This is when they were waiting for their new stadium to be built. So I think it was called, was it the Withdean? But the DJ at the time was the ranting punk poet Attila the Stockbroker, who played the music before the game. And I've got to say, it's not many grounds you go to where you hear Babylon's Burning by the Ruts in the run-up to kick-off. It's very entertaining afternoon out that was.
And they got
Matchday DJs, Matchday DJs, send us your playlists. And thank you very much, Alan, for that question. I hope we've answered that well enough. And that's it. I think we're out of time for this episode. Keep your questions coming, though. If you'd like to ask us anything music money related, drop us a line at the usual email address, which is Stuart.
thepriceofmusicpodcast@gmail.com.
And of course, you can now support the show via our Patreon page, where you can become a Price of Music fan or super fan for as little as £2 a month. Patreon.com/The Price of Music to find out more. Thanks very much for listening. We'll be back next week. Take care, everybody. Cheerio.